He controlled the city's most dangerous underworld, but tonight he was just a beggar shivering in the rain. He walked into the neon-lit diner, expecting disgust. Instead, a heavily plus-size waitress with a tired smile handed him a warm meal, unwittingly sealing her fate with the Mafia's most ruthless boss. The rain was coming down in sheets over Chicago, washing the grime of the city into the gutters. Inside Harrison's diner, a 24-hour joint located at the forgotten intersection of 4th and State, the smell of stale coffee and frying grease hung heavy in the air. Chloe Bennett wiped down the cracked laminate of booth number 4, her breathing slightly heavy. Chloe was a big woman, fat by the world's harsh, unspoken standards. Tipping the scales at over 250 pounds, she was used to the side eyes, the cruel whispers, and the blatant invisibility that came with her size. Society had a way of looking right through her, or worse, looking at her with pity. But Chloe had a spine made of steel, and a heart that was entirely too soft for the brutal city she lived in. She worked double shifts to pay off the crushing medical debt left behind by her late mother, wearing a uniform that clung uncomfortably to her thick thighs and broad shoulders. The bell above the diner door jingled, cutting through the low hum of the refrigerator. In walked a man who looked like the storm had chewed him up and spat him out. He wore a ragged, oversized military-style jacket that was frayed at the cuffs. His dark hair was plastered to his forehead, and dirt smeared his jawline. He limped slightly, dragging his heavy boots across the linoleum, keeping his eyes glued to the floor. "Hey, no loitering," snapped Sophia, the other waitress on shift, snapping her chewing gum loudly. "You gotta buy something or get out. Mr. Harrison doesn't run a homeless shelter." The man froze. He reached into his damp, torn pocket and pulled out a few copper pennies and a single crumpled dollar bill. I just want a cup of hot water," he muttered, his voice rough and gravelly. "And maybe a slice of lemon, if you have it." Sophia rolled her eyes, turning back to the espresso machine. "Hot water is for paying customers. Beat it." "Sophia, stop it," Chloe intervened, stepping out from behind the counter. Her heavy footsteps padded softly against the floor. She approached the man, ignoring the scent of damp wool and rain. When he finally looked up, Chloe felt a strange jolt in her chest. Beneath the grime and the scruff of a beard, his eyes were a piercing, striking amber. They were the eyes of a predator, sharp and calculating, completely at odds with his pathetic posture. "Please have a seat," Chloe said gently, gesturing to a booth near the radiator. "You're freezing." The man hesitated, then slid into the booth. He was Matteo Russo. Matteo wasn't a vagrant. He was the head of the Russo crime syndicate, a multimillionaire who held half the city's politicians in his back pocket. For the past 6 months, his life had been a nightmare of betrayal. His inner circle had been compromised. His ex-fiancée had tried to sell his secrets to a rival family, and he was surrounded by sycophants who only loved his power and his money. Disgusted by the shallow, parasitic nature of his world, Matteo had devised a test. He wanted to strip away the Rolexes, the tailored Armani suits, and the Bugattis. He wanted to see how the world treated him when he had absolutely nothing to offer. For 3 days, he had wandered the streets in disguise. He had been spat on, ignored, and threatened. He was about to give up on humanity altogether when he walked into Harrison's diner. Chloe didn't just bring him a cup of hot water. 10 minutes later, she walked over with a heavy tray balanced on her wide hips. She set down a massive plate of hot meatloaf, a mountain of mashed potatoes smothered in gravy, buttered green beans, and a steaming mug of black coffee. Matteo stared at the food, genuinely stunned. I can't pay for this," he stammered, keeping up his act. I showed you what I have. Keep your dollar, honey. Chloe smiled, a warm, genuine expression that transformed her face. She had a round face with soft cheeks, but her smile was radiant. It's on me. My shift meal. I'm trying to cut back on the late-night carbs anyway, she added, with a self-deprecating chuckle, patting her stomach. Eat. You look like you need it more than I do. Matteo watched her walk away, noting the way other customers averted their eyes from her large frame. He saw the harsh reality of her life in an instant. She was a woman mocked by the world, yet she was giving away her only meal to a stranger. As he ate the best meatloaf he had ever tasted, Matteo made a silent vow. He was going to find out everything about Chloe Bennett. Over the next 4 weeks, Matt the Drifter became a regular at Harrison's diner. Every Tuesday and Thursday night, Matteo would leave his sprawling penthouse on the Gold Coast, strip off his silk shirts, and don the tattered jacket. His right-hand man, Dante, thought he was losing his mind. "Boss, with all due respect, this is insane," Dante had warned him one evening, sitting in the driver's seat of an armored black SUV parked 2 blocks away from the diner. "The Moretti family is making moves on the South Side docks, and you're playing dress-up to eat soggy fries with a waitress? You don't understand, Dante," Matteo had replied, rubbing the fake dirt into his hands. "For 2 hours a week, no one is trying to kill me. No one is asking me for a loan. And she looks at me like I'm a human being." It was true. Matteo and Chloe had formed an unlikely, deep bond. During the quiet hours of the night shift, Chloe would sit in his booth, folding napkins while they talked. She didn't hold back. She told him about her struggles. She told him how hard it was to exist in a body that society deemed unacceptable. "People look at a fat woman, and they assume they know my whole story," Chloe told him one night, her voice barely above a whisper. "They think I'm lazy. They think I'm stupid. They don't know that I work 60 hours a week. They don't know that I spent my entire savings paying for my mom's chemotherapy before she passed. Sometimes, Matt, sometimes I just want to disappear." Matteo had clenched his fists under the table, a violent surge of protectiveness washing over him. He had the power to pay off her debts with the snap of his fingers. He could buy this diner and burn it to the ground just for the fun of it. But he couldn't blow his cover. Not yet. He was addicted to the pure, untainted affection she gave him. She brought him extra slices of cherry pie, slipped him old paperbacks to read, and even bought him a thick woolen scarf from a thrift store when the November chill set in. But the real world, and the mafia underworld, rarely stays hidden forever. The twist came on a freezing Thursday night. The diner was relatively empty, save for a few truck drivers. Matteo was sitting in his usual booth, sipping coffee, when the front doors flew open. In walked Isabella, Matteo's venomous ex-fiancée, wrapped in a white mink coat, shivering in disgust as she looked around the greasy spoon. Clinging to her arm was Lorenzo Moretti, the very rival boss Dante had warned Matteo about. They had clearly just left a high-end club and were slumming it for a late-night joke, drunk and loud. Matteo's blood ran ice-cold. If Lorenzo recognized him sitting here in rags, it wouldn't just be humiliating. It would show a fatal weakness. The Russo family boss, sitting unarmed in a diner dressed as a beggar. It would start a street war by morning. Matteo immediately slumped forward, pulling the collar of his ragged coat up and a filthy baseball cap down over his face, pressing himself into the corner of the booth. Isabella marched up to the counter, tapping her manicured nails loudly on the formica. Chloe stepped up, wiping her hands on her apron. "Welcome to Harrison's. What can I get for you?" Isabella looked Chloe up and down, her lips curling into a cruel sneer. She took in Chloe's heavy waist, the thick arms, and the cheap uniform. "My God, Lorenzo," Isabella laughed loudly, making sure the whole diner heard. "Look at the size of this one. Do they pay you in burgers, honey? I didn't know whales could walk on land." Lorenzo chuckled darkly, leaning against the counter. Chloe's face flushed a deep, humiliating red. She had heard it all before, but it never stopped hurting. She swallowed hard, maintaining her professional composure. "If you aren't going to order anything, ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to leave." "Oh, the whale speaks," Isabella mocked, stepping closer. "We want 2 black coffees, and make it quick. God, the smell in here is revolting." As Isabella turned her head, her sharp eyes scanned the diner. They landed on the ragged man sitting in booth 4. She squinted. "Wait a minute," she murmured, stepping away from the counter and walking slowly toward Matteo's booth. Matteo stopped breathing. His hand subtly reached into his boot, where he kept a small, concealed blade, his only weapon. He braced himself to kill Lorenzo right here in the diner if he had to. "Look at this piece of trash," Isabella sneered, standing right over Matteo's table. "Lorenzo, this beggar has the exact same cheap, fake watch that you bought as a gag gift last year." She leaned down, trying to see under his cap. "Hey, look at me when I'm talking to you, tramp." Before Isabella could snatch the hat off Matteo's head, a large, heavy body stepped firmly between them. It was Chloe. She used her wide, robust frame as a literal shield, blocking Isabella from getting any closer to Matteo. "Step away from him," Chloe said, her voice shaking, but her stance rock solid. "Excuse me," Isabella snapped, glaring up at the much larger woman. "Move out of my way, fatty." "I said step away," Chloe repeated, her voice rising in authority. "He is a paying customer, and he is a good man. You don't get to come in here in your fancy fur coat and treat people like garbage just because you have money. You want to make fun of someone, make fun of me. I'm used to it. But you leave Matt alone. Get out of my diner." Lorenzo stepped forward, his hand slipping inside his tailored suit jacket, a clear threat. "Watch your mouth, waitress. You don't know who you're talking to." Matteo's muscles coiled tight. If Lorenzo pulled a gun, Matteo would have to break his cover and slaughter him. But Chloe didn't back down. "I don't care who you are," Chloe fired back, picking up a heavy, scalding hot pot of coffee from the nearby warmer and holding it up. "I will call the cops, and while we wait for them, I will melt your face off with this French roast. Out, now." The diner went dead silent. Lorenzo, not wanting to risk a messy police encounter over a petty diner squabble when he had illegal weapons in his car, scoffed. He grabbed Isabella's arm. "Forget it, Bella. The smell of this pigsty is ruining my suit anyway. Let's go." Isabella shot one last venomous glare at Chloe. "Disgusting!" she spat, before turning on her heel and storming out, Lorenzo right behind her. As the door swung shut, Chloe let out a massive, shaky breath. She set the coffee pot down, her hands trembling violently. She turned back to the booth, looking down at Matteo, who was staring up at her in absolute shock. "Are you okay, Matt?" she asked softly, a tear slipping down her cheek, though she quickly wiped it away. "I'm sorry about that. People can be so cruel." Matteo looked at this fat, beautiful, fiercely brave woman who had just put herself between him and a notorious mafia killer to protect him. She thought he was a helpless beggar, and she had risked her life for him. At that exact moment, Matteo Russo didn't just feel gratitude. He realized, with a terrifying certainty, that he was madly, completely in love with her. But a dark dread settled in his stomach. He was in love with her, and he was lying to her. When she found out who he really was, a violent, dangerous mafia boss, it wouldn't just break her heart, it would destroy her. The aftermath of the diner incident left the air thick with tension. Chloe couldn't shake the image of Matteo's eyes, the way they had sharpened, the way he had coiled his body like a spring. He wasn't just a drifter. He was dangerous. But she pushed the thought aside, chalking it up to the trauma of the street. 2 days later, the impossible happened. Chloe was handed a letter by the diner manager. It was an anonymous offer from a shell company called Phoenix Holdings. It claimed she had been selected for a grant to cover the entirety of her medical debts, along with a job offer at their corporate office, a secretarial position with a salary that would change her life. She brought the papers to the diner, her hands trembling. When Matteo arrived, looking as disheveled as ever, she showed him. "Matt, look at this. It's got to be a scam, right? No one just wipes out $20,000 in debt for a waitress," she said, her eyes wide with a mix of fear and hope. Matteo looked at the documents, his heart sinking. He had been sloppy. He had been too eager to save her, and he had used a firm too close to his actual empire. He had to pivot, or he would lose her before she even knew his name. "Maybe it's a blessing," he lied, his voice steady. "Maybe you're just that good, Chloe. Maybe someone noticed how hard you work." "I don't know," she murmured. "It feels heavy, like there's a price." "There is no price for kindness, Chloe," Matteo said, reaching across the table to cover her hand with his. His skin was rough, but his touch was grounding. "Take the job. If it's a scam, you walk away. If it's real, you finally breathe." She took the job. For 2 weeks, she lived a double life. By day, she sat in a glass-walled office in the heart of the city, processing files. By night, she returned to the diner to visit the homeless man she had fallen in love with. It was an agonizing, exhilarating game of charades. Matteo watched her thrive. She wore fitted dresses now, her confidence blooming like a wild flower in concrete. She was beautiful, curvy, soft, and powerful. But the Moretti family had been watching, too. Lorenzo Moretti, humiliated in the diner, had kept a tail on the waitress. He couldn't figure out why the beggar mattered to her. But he knew that in this city, you didn't touch a man's woman unless you wanted to break him. He didn't know who Matt was yet, but he knew that Chloe Bennett was the key to the mystery. It was a Tuesday. Rain lashed against the windows of the office building. Chloe was working late when the lights flickered and died. She stood up, reaching for her phone, when the door to the office suite slammed open. 3 men in tactical gear stepped in. They didn't look like muggers. They looked like professional soldiers. "Chloe Bennett?" the lead man asked, his voice monotone. "Who are you?" She backed away, her heart hammering against her ribs. She was terrified, but she remembered the strength she had used against the woman in the fur coat. She grabbed a heavy glass paperweight from the desk. "We have a message for your boyfriend," the man sneered. They grabbed her. They didn't care about the cameras. They didn't care about the law. They dragged her out of the building and into an unmarked van. As the van sped away, Chloe was thrown into the floorboards. She realized then that this had nothing to do with her job. It was about him. It was about the man who sat in the booth and drank her coffee. "Who are you, Matt?" she screamed internally. Matteo sat in the cavernous silence of his Gold Coast penthouse, the city lights reflecting off the floor-to-ceiling windows. A crystal tumbler of vintage scotch sat untouched on his mahogany desk, right next to a secretly snapped Polaroid of Chloe laughing in the diner. He had been planning to tell her the truth tonight. He had bought a ring, a flawless emerald-cut diamond that rivaled the stars. Then the heavy oak doors of his study burst open. Dante stormed in, his face drained of all color, holding a burner phone. "Boss," Dante breathed, his voice tight with panic. "The Morettis. They hit the shell company's office an hour ago. They took her. They took Chloe." Matteo didn't shout. He didn't throw his glass. Instead, an eerie, terrifying calm washed over him. The gentle, weary drifter who ate meatloaf in Booth 4 died in that exact second, completely replaced by the ruthless, blood-stained apex predator of the Chicago underworld. He stood up, his jaw set in a rigid line. He walked silently to the hidden wall vault behind his bookshelf, punching in the code. He retrieved a custom-engraved 9mm tactical pistol, racking the slide with a sharp, metallic clack. "Call every soldier we have on payroll," Matteo commanded, his voice a low, lethal hum that made Dante shiver. "Lock down the southern shipping yards, the bridges, and the warehouse district. If a single hair on her head is harmed, I will personally carve out Lorenzo's heart and burn the entire Moretti bloodline to ash." Meanwhile, in an abandoned, rusted meat-packing warehouse by the river, Chloe was violently shoved into a wooden chair. Her wrists were bound tightly with zip ties, cutting into her flesh. The damp, metallic smell of the room made her stomach churn. She was bruised, her tailored office blouse torn at the shoulder, but she refused to weep. She had spent her entire life surviving a world that tried to crush her because of her size. She was not about to break for a group of thugs in cheap suits. Lorenzo Moretti paced in front of her, twirling a combat knife. "I don't get it," he spat, looking her up and down with blatant disgust. "You're a heavy, nobody waitress from a grease pit. Why does the ghost care about you? What are you hiding?" "I don't know what you're talking about," Chloe seethed, lifting her chin. "If you want money, my boss will pay you. Just let me go." Lorenzo laughed harshly. "Your boss? Sweetheart, your boss doesn't exist. You're a pawn in a game you don't even—" He was cut off by the deafening roar of a reinforced SUV tearing straight through the corrugated steel doors of the warehouse. Sparks rained down as the heavy vehicle slammed into a concrete pillar. Before the dust could even settle, the doors kicked open. Matteo's men flooded the space like shadows, laser sights cutting through the darkness. And then, Matteo stepped out. Chloe gasped, her eyes going wide. He wasn't wearing the filthy, oversized military jacket. He wasn't hunched over in defeat. Matteo stepped into the dim light wearing a flawlessly tailored three-piece charcoal suit that clung to his broad shoulders. His posture was imposing, radiating absolute, terrifying authority. The amber eyes that had once looked at her with such gentle gratitude were now cold, hollow, and fixed on Lorenzo with murderous intent. "Matteo," Lorenzo whispered, taking a stumbling step backward. He looked at the impeccably dressed Don, then down at the plus-size woman in the chair, and the pieces finally slammed together. You were the tramp in the diner. You fell for the fat waitress." "I did," Matteo said, his voice echoing off the concrete walls like a death knell. "And because I fell for her, Lorenzo, I gave you a few extra weeks of life. But your time is officially up." Lorenzo panicked, raising his weapon toward Chloe. He never even had the chance to pull the trigger. Matteo moved with terrifying precision, firing a single, deafening shot that shattered Lorenzo's right kneecap. The rival boss screamed, collapsing to the floor in a pool of crimson. The warehouse erupted into controlled chaos as Matteo's men disarmed the rest of the Moretti crew in seconds. Matteo didn't look at the carnage. He dropped his weapon and sprinted to Chloe, dropping to his knees on the filthy floor. He pulled a blade from his pocket and sliced through her zip ties, his hands shaking for the first time in his life. "Chloe, look at me," he pleaded, framing her face with his warm, calloused hands. "Are you hurt? Did they touch you?" Chloe pulled away, scrambling back against the chair. Her chest heaved as she stared at the man she thought she knew. "Who are you?" she choked out, tears of betrayal finally spilling over. "The man I knew couldn't afford a cup of coffee. You killed people. You lied to me. Every single night you sat there and let me pity you." "I am Matteo Russo," he confessed softly, ignoring the blood and screaming behind him. "I run this city. I lied because my world is full of vipers, Chloe. Everyone wants my money or my power. I needed to know if someone could love me when I had absolutely nothing. You gave me your only meal. You stood up to a gun for me. You saved my life long before I saved yours today." The Mafia war that erupted that night lasted a brutal 48 hours, resulting in the absolute eradication of the Moretti family. But Matteo's hardest battle was winning back the woman he loved. A month later, they stood in the center of his sprawling penthouse. Chloe had demanded space, and he had given it to her, agonizing over every second they were apart. Now she stood before him, wearing a stunning, deep red dress that hugged her curves flawlessly. She looked every inch a queen. "You don't get to test me," Chloe said, her voice firm, unwavering. "I spent my whole life being judged for how I look, for my weight, for my background. I will not be a billionaire's social experiment, Matteo. If you want me, you take all of me as an equal. No secrets, no lies. Or I walk out that door right now." Matteo stepped forward, his eyes burning with absolute devotion. He sank down to one knee, looking up at the magnificent woman who commanded his dark heart. "You are my equal, Chloe. You are my queen," he vowed, his voice thick with emotion. "No more lies. Just you, ruling this city by my side." He pulled the velvet box from his pocket, revealing the massive diamond. Chloe looked at the ring, then down at the terrifying, powerful man who was entirely at her mercy. A slow, radiant smile spread across her face as she offered him her hand. Life is rarely black and white, especially in a city built on shadows. Matteo and Chloe proved that true power isn't about the fear you instill or the wealth you hoard. It's about finding the one person who will fiercely protect you when you have nothing left to offer. The streets of Chicago still whisper about the plus-size waitress who tamed the devil, proving that a heart of gold is the most dangerous weapon of all. Did this story of unexpected love and hidden truths move you? If you enjoyed this wild ride, please smash the like button. Share this video with someone who loves a good twist and subscribe to our channel for more gripping dramas. Drop a comment below. Would you have forgiven him for the lie? We read every single one.